I want to just take a moment here to thank God for the providence that free peoples throughout history have been given. And I want to thank God for the gift of consciousness and being alive on this planet. I don't want listeners to think I'm a negative person. There's so much good, so much creativity, so much beauty, so much honor in this world. But good men and women tend to be very restrained and not take action, almost like embarrassed to be aggressive or to give alternative ideas. And we just kind of quietly sit there and have our own lives, our own friends, and recluse from the system. If we do that, we're going to lose everything, because as I ended the last segment, this tyranny we face is not like the Romans, for all their barbarous problems, conquering an area and bringing aqueducts and science and overall improving life generally. You could argue that being conquered by the Romans, if you were saying what's modern Switzerland today, turned out to be a good thing. In some cases, they weren't consciously trying to destroy everything, is the point. They were very abusive, very tyrannical. I'm not endorsing Roman civilization. You look at the elites we have today, they instinctively are just very twisted people. The ideology is anti-family, anti-stability. Why would our government fund ISIS to take over the Middle East and destabilize things and kill every Christian they find and blow up every church they find? I mean, our government's had some problems in the past, but I guarantee you Ronald Reagan wouldn't do that. I guarantee you John F. Kennedy wouldn't do that, or Dwight D. Eisenhower. I mean, I don't romanticize these people, but we truly have new levels of corruption. The boss hogs that ran this country, LBJ, as corrupt as he was, would have never signed on to a TPP waiving Congress's power. They were territorial. This was their country they were running. So we have traitors in our midst. And I agree with Lord Monckton. They think they've got full control now of the major nation states. And it's why they're just moving at warp speed right now. And their operatives are activating everywhere. I know Lord Monckton's a Catholic. I have a lot of Catholic friends. I don't get into the whole Catholic or Protestant fight. I'm just a Christian. But this new Pope activating and saying we need global government for, you know, the carbon taxes. I mean, I don't know what they got on him or what's going on, but that's got to be decried. People are really showing which side they're on right now. This is the big move. And, I mean, there's the headline. Pope Francis calls for new system of global government to tackle climate change. That's not an Infowars.com headline. That's in Time Magazine, Newsweek, the BBC. I mean, Lord Monckton, how do you square this?
What has happened here is that Pope Francis was brought up in the communist tradition of what's called liberation theology, which came out of the French universities, like so many other bad ideas, and it was taken back to Latin America by students for the priesthood who'd gone to study for university degrees in France. And, of course, one of those was Pope Francis. So he is an anti-capitalist through and through. He realizes the power of this environmental issue in two directions. One, as a way of rallying his fellow communists everywhere, and the other, as a way of getting himself to the high table. He's going to go to the UN and address the General Assembly, and they're going to cheer him to the echo because, of course, the UN, just like the EU, uses the climate as an excuse to gather more powers to itself. Now, the Pope wants to be part of that. And so what he's doing is repositioning the church as an entity which no longer opposes communism. Now, instead, it opposes capitalism. And this is really, I think, a mistake. If you were going to get into politics at all, you should certainly oppose communism and any other kind of totalitarianism. But the Pope is now, he's now come out in his true colors. He said, right, I am a communist. I want a communist world government. I want to be one of those in charge of it. And if anyone disagrees, then that's bad. Well, we have to stand against this. And we have to say, with every respect to the Pope, respect to his office anyway, that this is not the way forward. Communism killed 100 million people. Conservatively.
It's still,
conservatively, it's still killing people today. The climate change thing is already killing people as well, as they can't afford to heat or keep cool their homes, whichever climate they live in, because of absurdly high electricity prices. Global warming, even if it were to go to the sort of levels that the extremists predict of 3 or 4 Celsius degrees by the end of this century, which it won't, there hasn't been any this century at all, would not do very much harm. What will do harm is the global government that the Pope and the UN and most governments in the world are determined to establish. What we've got here is the entire governing class worldwide ganging up against the people. Now, here's the trick, Alex. What we've got to do is, you can moan about it all you like, but that won't achieve anything. What we've got to do is to accept that we have ultimately the money that they depend on. We have the numbers as well. They don't. And so what we need to start doing is increasingly taking the government of our own nation and of the world into our hands, the hands of the free peoples of the world, and say to our governments, no, we do not want Islam to become the normal political setup. Let it be confined to being a religion. We want a democratic political setup by which the people decide what shape their government will take, and not the governing class taking those decisions. And this is why I was talking earlier of the idea of establishing.
And I want to get to that, but since you raised that point, the head, what you're mentioning, the head of EU security came out 3 days ago in a speech and also in an article and said we should have Islam as the political governing system, basically. So first they removed Christianity from society, even though it wasn't governing, it was an idea that helped guide things, kind of like streetlights at night. Now they're saying we should be absorbed by Islam. Why is there a suicidal bent by the leftist in Western civilization? They rule it. They've taken it over. It's the engine of prosperity. Is there such an instinctive hatred of it that they have to execute it as some act of galactic vandalism, A? And then B, Lord Monckton.
You have to understand one thing about the left, which is absolutely crucial to understand. And that is that the left's ambition is to keep the poor poor because the poor, stupidly, vote left. The capitalist's ambition, the freedom-loving libertarian's ambition, is to make everybody rich so that they won't vote left. That's the fundamental divide in politics. The totalitarians want to keep people poor so that they can push them around.
But we will make people rich. It always works if they just get out of our way.
They don't want to do that. They want to run everything. Fingertip control. The very word totalitarian means they want to control every tiny last little detail of our lives, down to the last flickering, unreadable by poison-filled mercury light bulb. That's how they are. They cannot bear the idea of allowing people to take decisions for themselves. And the one thing that they are frightened of is people who are independent enough to do that.
That's right.
So if we, for instance, set up our own currency, if we set up our own parallel people's united democracies, forget the United Nations, let's have the united democracies, and let's start setting up a complete parallel set of global institutions that are governed not by the governing class, but by the votes of the people who wish to participate. And the left will find that very hard to take over, because as long as we keep it democratic, they can't stop us.
That's right. Explain a little bit about how the UN and these other bodies are totalitarian, because they always put provisos in, like Article 30 of the UN Charter, that says all these rights are null and void whenever we feel like it. But let's go back to a question I didn't quite get out to you. So for 30 years, they've said, you're wrong, there's no move towards covert global socialist communist government. For 20 years, they've told me I'm wrong. For 30-something years, they've told Ron Paul he's wrong. For 50 years, they told Barry Goldwater he was wrong. Now this covert plan is in the headlines. I had Nightline here 4 years ago. I had CBS Nightly News here 2 years ago. I don't even take the interviews anymore because they always distort them. And they look at me and I show them all these articles, all these clips of world leaders, Gordon Brown, you name it, calling for global government, Herman von Rompuy, Bill Clinton. And they looked at me and they said, that's a different global government than you're talking about. And then went on to say I was insane on television. So how do they square There is no world government. Al Gore was in Congress, as you know, 8 years ago and said there is no move for a carbon tax, and then proposed it a year later. What is this tactic of saying 2 + 2 = 5, raising debt limit doesn't raise debt limit? If we've been exposing global governments coming, it's bad, it's totalitarian, they deny it, now it's here. How do they then not become discredited? How do they just make this shift, and why are they making the shift?
3 words, Ion Mihai Pacepa. Now, he was the head of the Securitate, which was the secret police in Ceausescu's communist Romania about 30 years ago. Now, he was part of the largest directorate of the KGB, which was known as the Desinformația Directorate, the Disinformation Directorate. That directorate had 1 million Western communists who were not known to be communists, not known to be working with the KGB, who were in the West, beavering away in the BBC, in the CBC, in the NBC, in the ABC, all the big TV networks, all the big newspapers, all the big industries, all the big trade unions, all the big churches. They were everywhere, making sure that when the moment came, and the moment has now come,
oh, good God,
every one of these institutions would already have been taken over by communists. And let's use this word communist rather more freely than we have in the past, because
that's what it is.
After the McCarthy era, it was kind of not fashionable to use the word communist. But now that's the word we have to use. These are Marxists. These are people who wish to control us. And we do not wish to be controlled by them. They, unfortunately, control the overwhelming majority of the news media, which is why your program exists, Alex. There'd be no need for it if the news media were doing their job. So, because of this extraordinary degree of control that these million agents managed to obtain, and which they continued to operate even after the KGB had gone, this was a sort of self-perpetuating organization. Effectively, we, on the free market end of things, didn't organize. We didn't organize in the same way.
Well, it was more disinformation that they completely fell. They did fall because the engine failed, but by then they'd already metastasized other cancers into us, and now they're manifesting.
They'd already quietly taken over our major institutions. The BBC is a very good example.
And they are at war with families and wealth, and they admit Cloward and Piven. They want everybody poor so the Commissars can sit around at their duchies like kings over us. This is the new royalty. This is the new French Revolution.
That's it. It's an aristocracy of blackguards. It's exactly what they've been planning all along. And this is a huge attack by the governing class, which is now largely left-wing, on the people. And the people are going to have to get organized in various ways. And Alex, you're going to be a very important part of this, because we're literally going to have to establish a resistance movement, just like the French resistance, because that's the kind of regime we're going to end up with.
You're right.
If this carries on. Already they are more and more openly and more frequently demanding that the likes of me, who dare to do scientific research and publish papers in leading scientific journals, raising questions about their new religion of global warming,
be arrested.
They're increasingly saying we must be tried, imprisoned, and executed.
Well, that's right. They've now changed their tone. In the last month, there's been 5 articles I've seen seriously saying, shut me off the air and I'm dangerous. And they never used to talk like that. I mean, they're very naked now. And I agree. I believe they're about to make their move.
They're naked because they think they're very near to power. They think that Paris is going to do it for them. And at the moment, that's right, because we have governments who are intellectually enfeebled. I mean, people like David Cameron, he's a smooth operator, but he doesn't really believe anything or know anything or understand, because he wasn't from that generation that you and I were. We had to fight the communists to eventually prevail over them. He didn't have to do that. So he thinks he can sit back and be part of this world government, and somehow it will be a capitalist government on the night. Well, no, it won't. It will be another totalitarian government, somewhere between fascism and corporatism and communism. And if we don't stop it, it will take control over every detail of our lives. Already they're fiddling the data, fiddling the temperature records, fiddling everything, so as to try to pretend that what they now perfectly well know isn't happening with the climate is happening, because without
they've already done it. They don't call it warming. They call it climate change. Promise us you'll come on from Paris. I'm tempted to go to Paris and Greece. next month to cover all this. In fact, I'm looking at it, doing it right now. But thank you so much, Lord Monckton. Give us your website.
It's been a pleasure. Go to scienceandpublicpolicy.org. That's the best one to go to. Or whatsupwiththat.com, WATTS, upwiththat.com. Either of those, you'll find plenty of material from me on the climate question. So God bless you, Alex, and God bless America.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, he's never minced words before, but that was his strongest words. Then that's not rhetoric. Global totalitarianism, it's on. Fascist on top, communist on the bottom, because the globalists are exempt from the communist hell they'll put over the nation states. Diplomatic and political immunity. The new royalty. We are in big trouble. Big trouble. And we're going to have to mobilize. I mean, they want revolution against the police to start a civil war. Communist playbook all the way.